Hello, and welcome to the Central College of Homeopathy. In this short video, we'd like to give you a taste or sample of our course and also give you an idea of the subjects you will study if you come to join us. If you haven't studied homeopathy or nutrition before, I hope this will inspire and inform you. I will begin with Samuel Hahnemann, the founder of homeopathy, and then move on to some of the basic principles, such as like cures like, and also cover some of the remedies we use in everyday homeopathic practice. You will then be introduced to the inspirational Jacqueline Dunn, who is our nutrition teacher, and she will talk about how to detox the body and how to use good nutrition to help well-being. And lastly, there will be Hilary Dorian, one of our most experienced homeopaths and teachers in the country. And she will talk about the female hormonal remedy, sepia, that is so useful for people. So sit back, enjoy the lectures, and hopefully you'll join us soon. So Hahnemann was quite dissatisfied with the state of medicine at the time. And some of the methods that the doctors were using, he really objected to, such as bloodletting, kind of mineral poisoning, purging, getting people to be sick in order to clean themselves out, heating the skin and blistering. And he claimed that the medicine he had been taught to practice sometimes did the patient more harm than good. So he was upset about this. He didn't want to practice medicine. This is a statement he said: "My sense of duty would not easily allow me to treat the unknown pathological state of my suffering brethren with these unknown medicines. The thought of becoming in this way a murderer is pretty extreme, or a malefactor towards the life of my fellow human beings was most terrible to me, so terrible and disturbing that I wholly gave up my practice in the first years of my married life and occupied myself solely with the chemistry and writing." So he gave up. In 1784, he gave up, living chiefly as a writer and a translator. And that was interesting because there's a fate, there's a story with life, there's a destiny. And while he was translating one of these books, he came across the work of William Cullen, a treatise of Materia Medica. Materia Medica is remedies. And he encountered William Cullen's work on quinine. You might know quinine. Now, when I ask students in a class, they say, do you know quinine? And they go, oh, yeah, we know quinine. It's all in tonic water with a gin and tonic. And I say, well, fair enough. But they put the quinine in the tonic because people in the Far East used to drink gin and tonic and help them stave off malaria. But quinine is made from the bark, there's a picture of it, of a Peruvian tree. And this bark of the Peruvian tree was very, very effective in treating people who had malaria. And that is what was fascinating to Hahnemann, because he could actually see a medicine that worked. So this quinine, this bark of this tree, actually made people better from malaria. Now homeopathy is all about homeopathic remedies, the substances, which we'll talk so much about. And it's interesting to talk about quinine, which is the bark of the cinchona tree. And quinine was first encountered in Peru, and the Countess of Cinchona, the wife of the Viceroy of Peru, was cured with malaria fever in 1638 by a tribal doctor or shaman, in the time, who gave her the bark of this tree to cure her of this fever. And so what she did is, on her return, being Spanish, she was a Countess Cinchona, and she returned to Spain and she brought back lots of this bark of this Peruvian tree. And the Jesuit Catholic priests took it, made it into a powder, and started treating everyone in Spain for malaria with great success. And it was always called the Catholic drug because of Spain. And in England, Oliver Cromwell, who was a puritanical Protestant leader of the time, refused to take it when he got malaria, and he died. And But then a physician, Dr. Talbot, cured King Charles II of malaria, and they called it the English remedy. And throughout 1600 and the mid-1800s, it was used for malaria, fever, indigestion, throat diseases, cancer. So quinine has been, and I'm sure all of you have heard of it, an amazing medicine throughout a long time to cure malaria. And malaria has been so prevalent on this planet. Still, there's 2.7 million deaths annually. Around 46% of the world population live in a malaria area. And it's not the mosquito that's a problem. It's the microorganism, Plasmodium falciparum, which is a parasite, which is injected into our bloodstream when the mosquito bites us. And then the Plasmodium, this microorganism, travels to our liver and starts multiplying. And we generate fevers and chills trying to clean it out, because that's how we get better. We generate a fever. They say malaria has killed more people on the planet than all the wars put together. And in Africa still, 10% of the child deaths under 5 are due to malaria. So here's Hahnemann with his quinine, realizing this is an effective medicine for treating malaria. And he thinks, oh my God, first time there's a remedy or a medicine that works. So Hahnemann decides to do a little experiment, and he decides to take some of the quinine himself. And he takes 4 grams of bark twice a day for several days. And lo and behold, he experiences, first in his fingers and toes, they become cold. Then he gets heart palpitations. Then he gets a rapid pulse, anxiety. Then he gets cold and chills and shaking. Then he goes into fever. And then he goes back colds and chills and fever, lasting for 2-3 hours, tired, exhausted. And he has a brainwave. He goes, oh my God, I took this quinine stuff and it's like I've got malaria. It's almost like I've got exactly the disease that it's for. So I take quinine and I'm healthy, and it generates symptoms like malaria. So he just went, oh my God, this is a brainwave. So he went back and started doing some research, and he looked at the work of a man called Paracelsus, who was a physician, healer, alchemist, herbalist before Hahnemann's time. He also read the work of the Greek Celsus, and Galen. He studied the texts of the ancient Egyptians, and it all came back to one thing: like cures like. This was the statement. And that basically is that if a substance, those symptoms that a substance is capable to cause, to appear in a person when they're exposed to it, so if you take something and symptoms appear, that same substance also has the ability to cure those symptoms in a person where they occur naturally as a part of a disease process. So it's like cures like. So if you're healthy and you take something and you start developing symptoms, but someone else, as a natural disease process, has those symptoms, those same symptoms, it will cure them. So in the Latin, it's called similibus curente. So this like cures like. A substance can produce something, but in an unhealthy person or a diseased person, it can cure it. And even back in the day of Hippocrates, who's the godfather of allopathic medicine, Hippocratic Oath and all that, and he was around 1460 to 377 before Christ, before even Christ was around. He said that which a substance is capable of causing is also capable of curing. He put it very simply. Okay, like cures like. This is the first rule of homeopathy. Like cures like. What is our foundation stone? Okay, so some good examples of this, just to give you an explanation, is if we all cut up an onion, which we've all done, and you're cooking your spaghetti bolognese, you're cutting up an onion or making something more elaborate, maybe. Your eyes start burning, stinging, weeping, your nose starts running, there's tears falling down, and it's like, yeah, that's an onion. So if someone comes in with those symptoms, which are very similar to hay fever, might even be rhinitis, but often hay fever with a burning, stinging, we think, oh look, they've got burning, stinging around. What substance, if you're exposed to it, would cause that? And we all go, well, onions make that. So like cures like. So we don't actually give people an onion, but as we get into it, we give the onion in potency. We dilute it. And we're going to talk all about the understanding of dilution, potency, and how the body works with that. But this is like cures like. Another example, there's lots of examples. It's like, well, that's homeopathy is built on all these examples. It's like if someone can't get to sleep at night, if their mind is racing with 1,000 thoughts all the time, yeah, it's like I've got 1,000,000 thoughts. You think, well, what substance would cause like loads of thoughts? And you go, well, coffee, this person's like they've had 3 espressos before they've gone to bed. So if someone comes with those symptoms, we give them coffee, but in dilution and potency, like cures like. Yeah. So someone comes and into my practice, and they've got rheumatism of their joints, and their joints are hot, red, throbbing, burning, stinging, yeah? Or if they've got an eruption on their face, which is hot, red, and burning. Well, I think, what would cause hot, red, burning, throbbing, stinging pains? Bee sting, okay? Yeah, so it's like, if you're stung by a bee, this is it. But with like cures like. So to do that, you give them a bit of the same thing, and it will cure it. We also have, we make remedies from everything, and I'm going to talk about that. Homeopathy makes remedies from everything. And we also, homeopathy, the way it works is the remedies have a psychological effect on people as well as physical symptoms. So one of our favorite remedies is gold, aurum. And the energy of gold, and everyone knows this, is about being the best. So, you don't win the kind of wood medal at the Olympics. You want to win the gold medal. So gold are for people who are always aspiring to be the best and to do the best and own the most and be like the most important. So gold is for people who are trying to do this but can't quite match their expectations and go into depression. Okay? So there's a lot of psychological remedies. We use salt. So if you get salt on you, your skin dries up, you dry up. Yeah. But also, salt, natriumur, is one of our big grief remedies. It's when people can't express their grief and they dry up and they harden. Yeah. So like cures like. If someone's hardened up, their heart's hardened, it's like they've toughened up, they've got a wall around them, we give them salt. Yeah. Scorpion, we use scorpion for almost gangsters, really mean people. They're psychological people. Same with cannabis. If someone walks into my office and they're completely spaced out, can't remember what they've just said, yeah, give them cannabis. So homeopathy treats like cures like, both on a psychological and on a very physical basis. Yeah, on a very physical basis. So there are over 3,000 different remedies, and it's just a game of snap. Homeopathy is a game of snap. Someone walks in with a bunch of symptoms, and then we look for a medicine that would produce those symptoms in a healthy person. And then we bring them together, go snap, and the person gets better. And we do dilute remedies. So because we dilute remedies so much, we can use poisons. So we can use arsenic. So when we use arsenic, which is, we use this for asthma, skin eruptions, all these things. So we use arsenic, which is a poison, and the person, takes the remedy, and it cures those problems. So we have so many remedies in homeopathy. We use poisons, snake poisons, arsenic, and I'll talk about that, all the time. One of the first remedies that Hahnemann used was sulfur. And sulfur occurs at volcanoes. Yeah, it comes out this yellow thing, and the fumes and the smell, and bright yellow. And so, you know, it's kind of explosive. And what we use sulfur for is, skin cleaners, like you've got a boil, like a volcano coming out, or spots or acne, yeah, or cleaning the skin. So yeah, it's very much like cures like.
Hello and welcome back to another webinar. It's Jacqueline again, and you should have by now listened to Toxicity Part 1. And in that session, we covered all the different things, well, not all, but the majority of different things that we are exposed to that create a toxic reaction in the body, a toxic overload, if you like. And we really want to make sure that we can reduce our toxic load with the exposure to these things and also support our detoxification organs so they are better placed to deal with the ever-increasing toxicity of the Western world. So this section, we're going to be looking at the detoxification processes, all the different organs that are involved in detoxification and how we can support those organs to work a bit better. Because as I alluded to, if you'd listened to the first section in toxicity, we don't want to start the process of detoxification unless we know that all of the detox pathways are open and ready to work well. Otherwise, all we're going to end up doing is moving toxins around the body instead of getting them to leave the body. So on this page, we're just seeing all the different organs involved in detoxification and exactly how they're involved. So the skin being the largest detoxification organ of all, and it is actually the largest organ. And obviously that is involved in sweating. And lungs is where we exhale our toxins from. The lymphatic system is the removal of excess fluids from bodily tissues. Our bowels, obviously through the removal of feces. Kidneys, urine, the immune system, macrophages, which we have covered in a previous webinar. Liver, major detoxification organ. This organ actually has over 500 functions. It is absolutely busy every second of every day. And the 5 major functions of this organ are detoxification, normalization of blood fats, synthesis of blood proteins, the manufacturing of bile, and the synthesis and storage of glycogen. But obviously, it is extremely busy with phase 1 and phase 2 detoxification, which is something we're going to look at quite thoroughly in this webinar. So let's move on. So organs of the detoxification and elimination. So I just touched on the liver being one of the busiest ones. It is indeed the largest internal detoxification organ. So we spoke about the skin being the largest detoxification organ, but it's external. The largest internal detoxification organ is the liver, and it has so many roles, as I previously said. We can see here just on the right-hand side, the process of detoxification and elimination. The liver is in the center and the other organs involved at either side. So the toxins are entering through the lungs, through the skin, through the digestive system, and then going via the liver. And we'll talk about exactly what happens when they go via the liver. And then they exit through the lungs, the colon, the skin, and the kidneys through urination. So the liver is an integral component of our body's detoxification system. And as I just stated, it actually has 2 phases, phase 1 and phase 2 detoxification. So within these phases, the first phase that converts toxins, fat-soluble toxins, into water-soluble toxins. And then there's a metabolism process, which actually is still you've got phase 1, then you've got the intermediate metabolites, and then you have phase 2. We're going to be talking about this in a lot more detail, don't worry. I know it's a lot to take in all of a sudden, especially if you've never looked at detoxification before. So phase 1 reduces fats, glucose, carbohydrates, proteins, and toxins absorbed through the digestive tract into those intermediate substances, which I just mentioned. And then phase 2 converts these substances into water-soluble waste products so that they can be eliminated more easily through other organs. Once the liver has done its job, the secondary detoxification organs work to eliminate waste from the body. And that's our skin. It helps eliminate toxins through sweating. And while our lungs do the same through respiration, the gastrointestinal tract and the kidneys help us eliminate toxins that have been filtered through the liver via the bowel movements and urination. Interestingly, often when you come across people who have lots of skin issues, especially if it's a dryness to the skin, so things like eczema and psoriasis, one of their things that they report is that they don't sweat at all. So it's interesting that the skin is a large detoxification organ, and it is trying to remove toxins, and the way that it does that is through sweating. But if they are unable to sweat, then we see that in the skin. The skin gives us those symptoms of the dryness, and there is a problem with detoxification. So looking at liver phase 1, first of all, so liver phase 1 detoxification is the first line of defense against toxins and toxicity. It consists of a group of enzymes that are known as the cytokine P450 family. And these enzymes help neutralize substances like alcohol, caffeine, and many, many more. They offer protection by converting these toxins into less harmful ones, and they convert the fat-soluble toxins into water-soluble toxins. So the byproducts of phase 1 liver detoxification can still pose a toxic threat to the body if the toxins are allowed to build up and stay in the liver. They can start to damage DNA and protein synthesis. And it is the role of phase 2 liver detoxification to make sure that these toxins do not build up. So this provides final neutralization of the toxins so that they can be removed from the body. So phase 1 really is, the way that I like to simplify it is I say phase 1 is mopping and phase 2 is chopping. Really simple and non-scientific, but it's how I remember it and explain it to my clients. Because believe it or not, clients can get a little bit bamboozled if you try and go into the science of this kind of stuff. So the liver phase 1 mopping, it's mopping all the toxins up in the body, it's collecting them if you like. And then phase 2, it's chopping them up and trying to get them to other organs so they can be flushed out. That's a really simple way to remember it, the mopping and the chopping. And in phase 1, it's the cytokine P450 enzymes, and they are oxidizing, reducing, hydrolyzing. They're breaking down some of the toxins so that they're in a better form to be moved on and out of the body. And you can see here just on the left-hand side, nutrients that are needed in this process. And we're going to touch on this a lot more as we move through this particular webinar. The B vitamins, folic acid, glutathione, and flavonoids. So phase 2. Oh, before we move on to phase 2, this really just breaks down what's happening so far. So basic liver detoxification, we've got the toxins coming in, so whether they're chemicals or pollutants or drugs. And then the phase 1 is the oxidation of those, reducing them and kind of breaking them down, mopping them all up and getting them shifted into phase 2. But in that middle section there, you can see it says intermediary metabolites, which is a really complex term just to say that that is where we neutralize the free radicals. So the free radicals are the toxins, and they're coming in, and the liver starts to neutralize them so they're less harmful. And how it does that is it uses antioxidants, which we're going to speak about how we can improve antioxidants to improve that stage of detoxification. And then it moves on to phase 2, which we're going to speak about next. So before we do that, intermediate metabolites, this is what I was just saying, the reactive oxygen intermediates and free radicals formed as a result of phase 1. So during phase 1, certain toxins are formed, but that's okay because the body's got it. If it's got everything that it needs in terms of antioxidants, it can break those down and neutralize them. So it's basically the neutralization of toxins that are formed during phase 1. And how it neutralizes them is the use of antioxidants. So things like vitamin C and cruciferous vegetables. Cruciferous is just your leafy green vegetables, your kale and your broccoli, all of the leafy green ones that you can think of. And coenzyme Q10 is needed, copper, manganese, selenium, milk thistle, which is really, really great to support the liver, vitamin E and zinc. And yes, of course, we can supplement those things, but I would always encourage people to try and get them through their diet first and foremost, because supplements are just something else that the body has to deal with, whereas the body recognizes food, it understands and knows how to break down the nutrients in food, and it's fueling the body at the same time. The other thing about supplements is I don't see them as a long-term thing. Food, we do need long-term. We're going to need it every single day, several times a day. Whereas supplements, they can be a crutch to get us over a difficult period with our health. But we need people not to need them. So I always try and kind of encourage people to get what they need through their diet, and sometimes herbs as well, and homeopathy.
So what I want to say about sepia, first of all, is to tell you a little bit about the person who might need this as a remedy, what kind of person they're likely to be. Because with remedies, not everybody is going to move into a sepia state. It's, people who have this in their nature generally, and then are pushed into a particular position that exacerbates them. And we're going to see what that looks like. So a sepia person is usually an independent and dynamic person. And they are usually independent from an early age. Maybe, you know, having Saturday jobs as soon as they can. They like to earn their keep. They like to have independence, as I say, even quite young. And independence isn't a bad thing, but in people for whom independence is so important, it can make their relationships difficult. And they often have a history, but a checkered history of relationships. A typical sepia patient will thrive if they meet a partner who is their equal and allows them their freedom, because the compromise of a relationship is quite difficult for a strong-minded sepia. But they do compromise, and this can bring up problems for sepia when they have to compromise to make a marriage work, when they have children, and when they have to compromise on their independence in particular. It brings up a lot of resentment for them. Being an independent person, sepia women are often more career-oriented rather than oriented towards raising a family, although they could be engaged in both activities simultaneously and be having a rough time balancing the two. This is something we see a lot of women who are trying to juggle being a wife and mother and having children. And if they are raising a family, even though they love their family dearly, it may stress them more than it will other remedy types. And occasionally people who need this remedy have difficult time showing affection, and sometimes can be a little bit indifferent to the people they love. And as we see as we go on, they have a lot of anger and aversion to their partners. It's difficult for them. It's difficult because a sepia needs a lot of intellectual and creative stimulation. They're very dynamic and very hardworking, so they tend to do well in their chosen career, and their career is really, really important to them. Let's say that a career woman stops work to have a baby, and even in the pregnancy, she may feel a curtailment or a loss of independence. People will say, don't smoke, don't drink, don't eat blue cheese. Some bars you go into, it says, we will not serve pregnant women. It makes them feel like their body is not their own. But this is small fry in comparison to the restrictions that she will have when her baby is born. And when they start to feel this restriction, they start to feel angry and resentful, and then maybe a little bit depressed, and can become negative and complaining. Catherine Coulter says in her book, Portraits of Homeopathic Medicines, that the classic picture is of the woman seeking emancipation from her traditionally passive and too limited role as wife and mother in the home. So sepia, as we can hear, are not earth mothers who bake all day or sit down and fashion a rabbit out of a paper cup and pipe cleaners, 2 pages maximum into Thomas the Tank Engine, and they want to scream. You know, I resonate a little bit with this. Loved being a mum, loved my kids, but wasn't a mum who could get down and play mindless games with my kids all day. Had a friend who was just brilliant at that. She really could just play and get into that mindset, and was really, really happy doing so. But a typical sepia mum needs more stimulation than that is providing, and they find it quite difficult. They also start to find it frustrating that they have to carry around their own weight in baby equipment, nappies, milk warmers, bottles, baby wipes, clean set of clothes for the worst of the accidents, buggies, car seats, and spontaneity becomes a thing of the past. And they get really, really irritable. And the person that they get most irritable with and most resentment to is their husband. And it's not fair and it's not true, and I often try and point this out to my sepia patients, but their feeling is that since they've had a baby, their life has changed completely. It's totally gone upside down, and they feel that their husband's life hasn't changed at all. You know, he commutes up to London. Oh, an hour on the train, he could read a book. They haven't read a book since baby was born. He has a lunch break. He might go to some shops or go for a drink with his mates, a bit of socializing. Haven't been out with their friends for ages. He's getting an intellectual stimulation at work while she's at home with the Teletubbies. And this resentment builds until their husband can do nothing right. And especially if they have PMT, everything about him is going to irritate them. The way he stands, the way he breathes, you know, do you have to stand like that? You know, why do you always stand like that with one foot in front of the other? Stand like a normal person. And the poor husband's just like, yeah, I'm just standing. Why do you make that funny noise when you breathe? Can't you breathe without making a noise? Oh, you want me to stop breathing now? The poor husband is getting it from all quarters. So sometimes it's worth reminding the sepia patient that, you know, you decided together to have a family, and you have the choice for a while of not going back to work while your husband works. And do you remember the commute? It wasn't a lovely train trip sitting down reading a book. You often had to strap hang most of the way with people breathing on your neck, uncomfortable, often having to sit at your desk and answer emails while you're eating your lunch, standing up all the way home exhausted from doing a work you don't like, in order to make sure that you and the kids are able to do this whilst they're young, and sort of trying to remind them that it isn't a walk in the park, having a stressful job and a commute. But that is kind of how the sepia take it. Like, your life hasn't changed and my life has changed completely, and you just don't understand anymore. They are often their own worst enemy because they complain about their husbands, and they'll say, you know, he has no idea how hard it is to be a mum. And I'll say, well, you know, maybe if he's a nice bloke, just say, I'm going to be going out on Sunday to do something. Will you look after them? And that will help him to understand how hard your job is on a daily basis. And also, you know, they'll say, if only he would just help a bit around the house. And I say, well, do you ask them to help around the house? Sepia say, I shouldn't have to. I shouldn't have to ask him. He can see, the same as me, what needs doing. And say, yeah, but maybe he's thinking, oh, I don't want to tread on her territory, you know. And if you just said, look, I'm drowning here with all of this domestic stuff. Could I give you a couple of jobs that will be yours, which will be to put the bins out or to do whatever it is? And they might well say, oh, God, yeah, sure, of course I can do that. But sepia are their own worst enemy. They don't want to have to ask because they're independent, and they don't want to appear weak. And they just feel that their husband should see these things, and they shouldn't have to ask them. And I say, you know, a lot of men have what my husband calls domestic blindness. They don't always see what needs to be done, but are usually very happy to help if you ask. But it's that asking that the sepia find difficult. And that's not to say that sepia can't be happily married with children, but they have to have their own time and space to reflect and pay credence to her creative and spiritual side. So the unnurtured sepia develops various negative personality traits, especially impatience, irritability, really sometimes downright nastiness. She's beyond any attempts at diplomacy, and her words can be very hard and direct hitting. Too lethargic to manage basic housework, sepia is constantly worn out and lacks any interest in work or sex. In fact, her mood may take a downward turn following intercourse, which is perceived by her as yet another chore. And she may also be plagued by fears of poverty or insanity. The lack of wanting to do housework is kind of, they feel like a drudge, essentially. That is the thing. They feel like a drudge, and they don't really want to be doing that kind of work. It's mindless, and they're tired, and they're irritable, and anything to do with the house, any demands on them is what's going to make them irritable.